What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Sovereign Syndicate, an upcoming narrative title that takes a lot of inspiration from Disco Elysium and mixes it with some steampunk elements reminiscent of Arcanum. That said, this is not the first time I've taken a look at Sovereign Syndicate. I first did a video on it back in, I believe it was August. However, there have been some updates to it since then, or at least the demo that is available publicly, that I thought were worth taking a look at. And I'll link the Steam page down below where you can check the demo out for yourself. So in terms of what has changed since then, it is primarily down to things like UI as well as the graphics themselves. For instance, the angle of the camera that you're looking at here is quite a bit more overhead than it was previously, along with other changes like that make the experience itself a little smoother, alongside better tutorials and things that explain what you're doing and how things are conveyed much more clearly. But seeing as the channel has tripled in size since the last time I talked about this game, let's dive into some of the basics of what it is. So, Sovereign Syndicate sees us taking up the role of one of three characters. In the demo, we have the first one available to us, Atticus Daly, a Minotaur, who has frankly seen better days. But the story will revolve around these three characters and some of their personal motivations. Many of their personal motivations are represented with sort of voices in their head, again very similar to Disco Elysium here, but you can see sort of aspects of his personality battling it out on screen here via things like wit, spryness, animal instinct, and a handful of other things. Now much of this game will be, of course, reading a lot of text going through the story, while at the same time potentially uncovering various solutions based off of your setup, which is where the RPG mechanics kick in to a degree. So right at the start, you'll be able to pick a focus for Atticus here that leans into what he's good at, basically an initial stat setup. This is hardly final, but what it will do is grant you a major arcana card for your tarot, as the tarot system is pretty integral to the way the skill check system works. These attributes themselves representing your humors, and these are used to perform various skill checks alongside your tarot deck. Each individual attribute has its own tarot deck, however, you can assign things like the major arcana cards to modify these draws in certain ways to give you some control over how things work exactly. But when you perform a skill check, it's down to your innate bonuses to that attribute, as well as whatever tarot card you draw, which behind the scenes works much like rolling a dice kind of, and then all of those numbers added up have to beat the difficulty check for that individual skill check, which of course determines whether or not you pass or fail. Now, as this game takes a lot of inspiration from Disco Elysium, failure isn't necessarily that bad, and they often try to present things that allow failure to be interesting, though generally failure will have a negative effect on things like your health or your nerve, which could lead to your untimely demise. However, using these skill checks pass or fail will contribute experience to each individual attribute, and once that attribute hits a certain milestone, you can level it up, which will allow you to pick things like just flat bonuses to that particular attribute or major arcana cards, etc. So exactly what a level up will do for you does vary a little bit, but basically the more you use one of these in particular, the better you'll get at it. But one thing I like about this is that they've allowed for failure to, again, be interesting or lead to more potential. Because again, these attributes get better even if you're failing, and I've gone so far as to have a playthrough where I've failed like almost every check, and most of what that led to was simply more interesting situations. And then we have the world this is set in, which again is sort of a steampunk era version of London that mixes in a healthy dose of fantasy at the same time. We have things like minotaurs, centaurs, there's even an allusion to werewolves, alongside things that even seem a little more on the occult side. Overall, the world is pretty interesting, and I think the story itself has potential. Now, unfortunately, I don't know anything in regards to a release date for this title. Again, this demo has been available for quite some time. It looks like they're clearly making progress, judging by this update, but I've heard nothing in terms of a release date. But if you're a fan of narrative games, I certainly think this is one to keep an eye on, as it looks to be shaping up quite well. And as I enjoy a good narrative game, this is a game that I plan on reviewing when it eventually does launch, but in the meantime, you can check it out for yourself via this demo that is linked below. That is all I've got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you found it interesting, as narrative games have been on my mind a little bit, as I just recently did a video about my favorites, which you can check out on the channel as well if you're curious about more games in this genre. genre. Regardless of all that, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.